On to item 10.1, the report to Council seeking the final endorsement of planning proposal for Golden Valley Road on page 45. We have the recommendation. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a counter motion to the resolution, and that is to change the word of the recommendation from, in the first instance, make the amendment to reject the amendment, leaving part 2 as it is.
You're moving that part 1 is removed from the
The Council requests that the Department of Planning and Environment refuse the amendment to the Kiama Local Environment Plan for lot, etc.
Okay then. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded, Councillor Rice. Right. So you have a motion before you that Council requests the Department of Planning and Environment to refuse the amendment to the Local Environment Plan. You wish to speak on that?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe that I have 3 very, very good and solid reasons for us refusing that. The first reason is that nothing has changed since Council last visited this matter. All of those here, except for one, voted against. I think it would be contrary, and I think it would provide little faith in our determination going forward if we were to change our mind on something that hasn't changed in itself. Plus, it would show absolute contempt for the community that we represent, given the strong opposition to this planning proposal. The second reason is that it's been proven that no benefit to the town would result from this with regard to transport, with regard to pharmacy and commercial benefit, no improved amenity. The primary school would still have the fluctuating number of people, so there is no benefit there. The only benefit is to the proponent. It would harm the amenity of those living around. The third reason, and I think this is the most important reason, and that is overwhelming popular opinion that this proposal is not in the best interest of the village, and there are substantial planning reasons to support that popular opinion, including breaches of Goal 4 of the Illawarra-Shoalhaven Regional Plan, the Kiama LEP zoning objectives for rural land, sections 1 and 4. And they're the reasons that I've put this motion.
Is there anyone to speak against it? Councillor Steele?
Yes, Mayor. I'll speak against it. In 2016, in December, I got beaten here 8-1, as you will remember. And when you get beaten 8-1, you think to yourself, wow, am I out of step? I believe I was in step and still am in step, and I think I was right, and I think tonight will prove I was right. It's unfortunate we've got 2 councillors missing because I think there'd be a greater majority. I've listened to all the arguments backwards and forwards, and I can hear what my colleague said. In my opinion, the town is dying. The news agency is battling. You need more shops, otherwise you're going to lose them. Sure, you've got Freddo's, but that's not going to save the town. Some of you will disagree. Just for a matter of interest, one of the statements was made last night about turning Freddo's into a chemist shop was just ridiculous. I mean, it would be the worst thing that could possibly go. Can you imagine going there with something wrong and a little girl over the counter gives you a prescription? No, thanks. The town needs to grow slightly. You brought it on. Sorry. The town needs to grow. It needs more population. I won't go through all Neil's points, but I haven't seen anything in all this time that's changed my mind. I gave my word to Jeff that I would stick with this, and in 22 years, Mayor, I've never gone back on my word, and I ain't going to go back now. So, if this motion is defeated, I'm foreshadowing a motion to support the recommendation.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the recommendation? Councillor Rice.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. My perspective on this proposal is, one, that it was put forward prematurely, and two, that the necessary tightening up of Jamberoo's planning scheme has barely begun. Following the defeat of the same planning proposal by Council in December 2016, a subsequent motion was endorsed. It reads that Council engages with the community in order to locate areas suitable for future development in Jamberoo and to assist development of a Jamberoo-specific development control plan. As yet, no further action has been taken to identify areas that are acceptable to the community for future development. I recognise that we're this evening continuing deliberation on an application that's already underway, but there are issues raised in the report that continue to persuade me that we should not proceed with this development at this point. In acknowledgement of the issues surrounding this planning proposal, the Joint Regional Planning Panel recommended that community engagement should occur to devise a coherent planning framework for Jamberoo. It implied that this should extend beyond the Jamberoo DCP and include local land zoning and identification of an urban boundary. The JRPP also recommended that Kiama should develop a rural strategy to identify regionally significant agricultural land and land to be preserved for agricultural purposes. The planning proposal has continued to progress, but meanwhile I've heard no discussion of pursuing these ends, and to make our challenge worse, we've had reluctance shown by the Department of Primary Industries to hasten their mapping of Kiama's agricultural land. In assessing this proposal through the gateway, the Department of Primary Industries state no objection to the planning proposal, but in their letter to Council of January 25th this year, they confirmed that the land is good quality, and if it hadn't been identified for urban expansion, it should be maintained for agriculture. Nevertheless, the DPI continue to have no objection, because their favourable consideration of the site for agriculture has been overshadowed by its development potential. The land has always been used for grazing purposes to support either the local dairy or beef industries. Its agricultural potential was unreasonably downplayed by the Joint Regional Planning Panel, where at 4.6 hectares they considered it to represent only a relatively small proportion of the agricultural land resource in Kiama. Further, on page 57 of the report, it's mentioned that as Class 3 agricultural land, it would not be considered significant. We need to be aware of these assumptions because through them, Kiama leaves itself open to having successive small parcels of Class 2 and 3 agricultural land being proposed for redevelopment. If we are serious about protecting agricultural land, we need a rural strategy in place soon. This particular parcel of land has an interesting history. Through various sources, we have heard that it was identified for development in 1974, but then dislodged in a subsequent town plan. We know that it was re-identified for development following that, but then excluded from the 2011 urban strategy until further meetings with Council re-included it with potential for development in stage 2. Possibly this toing and froing explains the eagerness of the owner to have it developed as soon as possible, to be certain of it not being flipped again. The indicative time frame for considering the merits of Stage 2 land for urban expansion is between 2016 and 2021, and this application was received around mid-2016. It was an unfortunate time because Jamberoo was already in the midst of 2 developments without the opportunity for the resultant village character to settle. Although it appears that all of the planning ducks are lined up, in my opinion, Kiama needs to finalise its strategic planning for Jamberoo before it pushes ahead with this development. A more opportune time for this proposal will occur following the completion of the Jamberoo urban and rural strategy.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, we've been looking at this for a long time now, and I know originally I did move the motion, which was supported, not to go ahead with it, But and having heard all my colleagues here, I agree with bits of all of it. But I do think that given that this was in the, that I agree with the recommendation to move forward, and I would see that if what's happened last time, if we don't support it, meaning the original recommendation, that'll then come back, basically we're going to lose again. And as has been pointed out in numerous meetings with councillors, we're on the losing end of quite a few when we've been trying to play those sorts of odds. So although I know a few people here are going to be upset with me, the Towns I know is divided on this particular issue, and so I'm against this particular motion and supporting the original recommendation by council staff.
Are there any other speakers against the motion? If not, Councillor Rowley, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I saw in 2016 Councillor Westhoff raise his hand. I saw Councillor Watson raise his hand. Councillor Way raise his hand. I saw Councillor Brown, Councillor Andrew Sloan, who's both not here, raised their hand. Councillor Kathy Rice raised their hand. The Mayor raised his hand, and I raised mine. We've been told by one of the proponents for this, one of the paid consultants, one of the two paid consultants that spoke in public access last night, that there is nothing changed. There's nothing changed. So I have to think what might have changed. I mean, I know that this council is above pecuniary interests and non-pecuniary interests. No one would be gaining anything from this, and no one would be gaining anything in the future from this. So I don't think that's appropriate. I can't think that there would be anybody that would be wanting to curry favour with the community, given the community's absolutely outspoken voice and numerical superiority for saying, no, they don't want this. I've heard talk of the silent majority. The last time I heard the words the silent majority, they came out of the mouth of Richard Nixon. He was saying about those people who were in favour of the Vietnam War. And we all know what happened to Richard in the Vietnam War. The silent majority, if that's the argument that's being used, those people who use that argument will have to identify the silent majority and show how they can read their minds. That hasn't been shown. There hasn't been any logic to that. So, this plan, I believe, should go through with a recommendation to the Minister. Now, it won't be the courts, Councillor Way, who decide this. It won't be the Land and Environment Court. It won't be the Joint Regional Planning Panel. It will be the Minister, the Minister's decision. And once the Minister makes his decision, that's it. So you have to consider that this isn't going to come back to us. The proponent will not be able to come up against a ministerial decision. So what we need to do is to consider our first decision. Now, I can understand Councillor Steele, he gave his word on this, and I admire him for that. It doesn't mean he's right, but I think that he gave his word, and good on him for that, and I understand that. But the rest of us have also given our word when we took on the job as councillor. So I want to know, either you were wrong then, I don't think so, or you're wrong now if you vote against it, because the community will be the judge. Thank you.
I'll now put the motion. That is, and is a planning motion. So those in favour of the motion, please raise their hands. Those against? I declare the motion lost. And Councillor Way, you foreshadowed.
No, I did.
Oh, Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Mayor. Rather than go through all the rhetoric again, it's an emotional one, and there's a lot of both sides. Rather than go into that, Mayor, I'll just move the recommendation as printed, simple as that, and put it to a vote.
Is there anyone to speak against the motion? Councillor Riley.
Mr Mayor, I have to speak against the motion, and I'm not speaking so much against the notion, but in favour of those people in Jamberoo who put so much effort, so much energy and so much knowledge into their protestations against this. Think of them, how many there were. They all put their best efforts into this, and now I believe that we are dismissing them for reasons that I can't see, and I'm sure they will never see.
At this stage, I'd like to say a few things for the motion. And firstly, one thing that I did say many years ago when I first got onto council was sometimes councillors have to make decisions that are not going to be popular throughout the whole of the municipality. The reason for making the decisions are decisions made in the best interest of the whole community. I reflect back that this has been proposed in 1974, as Councillor Riley has said. It was also dealt with in the LEP in 2006. It was also included in the LEP in 2011. It was in the Kiama urban strategy due to be placed out for development or the planning proposal in 2016, which it has. We have ensured that any new development in Jamberoo will be sympathetic to the village character by the new Jamberoo DCP, which has been developed through community consultation. This, to me, will define the final boundary for Jamberoo, and as it has always been part of my mission to preserve as much of the rural prime agricultural land that we can in this community. I can hear the sniggering from people over there, but believe me, the efforts that I've put into this valley and saving the Jamberoo Valley since I started working in the valley would leave a lot of you to shame to what's been done. I am in full favour of this development going through so that it does end up defining the final boundary of Jamberoo. Okay, Councillor Rice.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make one point that really extends upon the point that Councillor Riley said, because I feel like it is a very poor demonstration of response to the community. We've had overwhelming community expression of their opinion, and there was obviously a lot who were in favour of the development who didn't express their opinion, and I think it really doesn't reward those who go out of their way to put their time into doing what they do, and it just makes them feel like, well, there's no point. Decisions are made without our involvement. Who are we? What are we cared for? And I don't think that that is what Kiama is about. So I feel very upset that that's probably the way that you feel, and it's a poor message.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Steele, you right to reply? If not, it is a planning matter. Those in favour of the resolution, please raise their hand. Those against, I declare the resolution carried.